That really unfortunate moment when you just spent an hour filming this YouTube video already and your microphone was off the entire time, the entire hour of filming. So here I am, once again, about to film an entire YouTube video that I just sat filming for an hour again. Hello everybody, welcome back to another YouTube video. Today we are going to be talking about Bridgerton Season 3 Part 1, because is it even a Netflix show if they don't release it in multiple parts anymore? No. The answer is no. Okay, so if I had to use 3 words to describe Bridgerton Season 3 Part 1, it would be fast, flirty, and Featherington. And we'll get into that in just a second. The way that I'm going to review Season 3 is I'm going to go through certain characters and sort of review their plot points. Because the thing about Bridgerton is that it's an ensemble show. There's lots of different characters and lots of different plot points going on. So it's hard to review it as a whole. It's a lot easier to review it as like individual characters and their individual plots. Obviously, since they are the leads of Season 3, we are going to start out with Colin and Penelope. The love story of Season 3 is friends to lovers, but that's not to say that there's not some angst between Colin and Penelope. At the start of the season, Penelope is still very upset with Colin for what he said about her at the end of Season 2, where he was basically like, I will never ever court Penelope Featherington. Penelope is still dressed in her very ugly yellow dresses and her very bad hairdos, and Colin comes back from his travels sporting a brand new look that the fans of Bridgerton have dubbed as Sexy Pirate Colin. Along with Colin's new look comes a new personality where he decides to flirt with every woman that looks in his general direction. Long story short, Colin is a bit of a man whore now. It's actually borderline annoying how suave he has to be around all of these random debutantes. Colin also finds himself having threesomes, which in and of itself, I want to talk about. It's a very weird theme that Bridgerton tries to give their leading men every season, where they like have to be having sex with people that aren't the main love interest. It's very weird. Like they have to have the main guy being a whore just before they find the love of their life. It's a really weird theme that they've got going on, and I kind of hope they stop doing it. Just thought I'd point that out. Colin and Penelope finally talk for the first time since his return, and Penelope does not really give Colin the time of day, which, good for her, as she should. I want her to make Colin grovel. I want her to make Colin cry. Penelope finally realizes that enough is enough, and she needs to have a makeover to escape her family, whose plotline we will talk about in just a minute. Penelope shows up to Lady Danbury's ball, the first ball of the season, in her new look, and she looks absolutely stunning. Everybody in the ballroom is absolutely gagged by her new look, including Colin, which is very fun to see. Penelope's new look brings her a lot of male attention that she is not used to, and she unfortunately fumbles the bag pretty poorly. However, despite striking out with all these other men, all hope is not lost, and Penelope is greeted by a new character named Lord Debling, who seems to have a very genuine interest in Penelope. However, nothing good lasts forever, because Eloise's new best friend, Cressida Cowper, steps on the back of Penelope's dress, ripping it and embarrassing her in front of Lord Debling. And the newfound relationship between Cressida and Eloise is something that we will definitely talk about. Penelope runs out of the ball, shortly followed by Colin, where he goes outside to try and talk to her, but Penelope gives Colin a piece of her mind. And as she should. Penelope then leaves, goes home, and writes her whistle-down column for the next day. Speaking of the next day, Colin then finds Penelope in the Featherington garden, where he essentially apologizes for what he said last season. He claims that he's a new man, he's different than he was, and that he is so sorry. And to prove how sorry he is, he does the only logical thing that one could think of to do in this situation, and he offers to help Penelope find a husband. Because that's not going to end badly for anybody. Penelope and Colin shake hands, making a deal, but then Penelope immediately feels awful for what she wrote about Colin in Lady Whistledown, where she essentially said that Colin Bridgerton's new personality is fake, and that Colin Bridgerton doesn't even know who he is. Which is probably like top 10 worst things you could say to any man, especially in the 1800s when like pride is all they have. So at this point, Colin really hates Lady Whistledown. However, Penelope's anger towards Colin has seemingly fully disappeared, and they are friendly again. You know, just a friend helping another friend learn how to flirt. We see Penelope attempt to flirt with a group of men, and obviously it goes poorly. It goes so poorly, in fact, that Colin then has the brilliant idea to bring Penelope to Bridgerton House to hold private lessons, just the two of them, where nobody can interrupt them. Because, like we say, Colin is the smartest Bridgerton. Penelope finds herself in Colin's office alone, where she ends up reading his diary that's just open on his desk. Now, the whole scene with Colin getting angry at Penelope for snooping and then Penelope having to bandage up his hand is basically a scene ripped directly out of their book. But I do want to mention that I feel like the plot of Colin wanting to be a writer is a little shoehorned into the season and feels kind of random, just because we've had 2 seasons to build up Colin as a character, and not once have we mentioned that Colin enjoys writing or aspires to write about his travels or even does it just for fun. So the fact that Colin all of a sudden now cares so deeply about his writing does feel a little random and a little out of place just for the show version of Colin. Eventually, everyone finds out that Colin has been giving Penelope lessons on how to get a husband, and because of this, Penelope has to write some pretty awful things about herself in Lady Whistledown, which unfortunately just makes Colin hate Whistledown even more than he already did. After everyone finds out, Colin, being the smart Bridgerton, remember, decides to go and visit Penelope at her house at night. To make sure that she's okay. Penelope reassures Colin that she's fine, but then Penelope asks Colin to kiss her. And all I'm saying is, it's a pretty good kiss. It's a pretty good kiss. It got me good. If you don't know, I have a Patreon where I post reaction videos and commentary tracks, and if you want, you can go and watch my full reaction videos to part 1 of Bridgerton season 3. In case you were wondering, this is what my reaction was to the kiss that they share at the end of episode 2. It got me good. It was a good kiss, what can I say? But if you want to watch the rest of my reactions to part 1 of Bridgerton season 3, you can do that on my Patreon. The link is in the description down below. But back to Colin. After that steamy kiss, Colin finds himself having wet dreams about Penelope, which I think is very funny. Colin and Penelope are very awkward around each other after that kiss, and I just want to point out how amazing I think Nicola Coughlan is when it comes to comedic writing. I haven't seen Dairy Girls, but I'm pretty sure that that's like a comedy show, but with Penelope being the lead of this season, she's really allowed to have more humor as a character, and Nicola does a fantastic job with comedic delivery, so I just wanted to give her praise on that. Despite what Whistledown has written about Penelope, Lord Debling is still pursuing her, which makes Penelope very, very happy. So happy, in fact, that she tells Colin that his lessons worked, which makes Colin not so happy. Colin finds himself asking Violet about love and how it can sometimes be best when it is sprung from true friendship. Colin is being very subtle in this conversation, and Violet definitely cannot tell that he's talking about Penelope. The more that Colin sees Penelope and Lord Debling together, the more his feelings start to eat away at him. All of a sudden, Colin Bridgerton doesn't want to be a whore anymore. He even tries to have another threesome, and his heart is just not in it. He also is talking to his guy friends, and he's like, does it ever bore you guys with having to pretend to be this cavalier all the time? And his guy friends are like, no. Before the final ball of part 1, a ball that Colin has no intention on going to, by the way, Violet has a really nice conversation with Colin where basically she tells him that he needs to start putting himself first instead of putting everybody else first, or else he's gonna find himself alone. Violet also happens to mention to Colin that the streets are saying that Penelope Featherington is going to be receiving a proposal from one Lord Debling at the ball tonight. And all of a sudden, Colin wants to go to the ball. Something that I really love about Violet Bridgerton as a character is that she always can see what her children are going through, but she never pushes them to talk about it. She'd rather them come to her and open up on their own time. And I think that that's a very admirable trait in a mother, so I just wanted to point that out. Colin shows up at the ball and interrupts Penelope and Lord Debling in the middle of the dance, which is like an absolutely insane thing to do in the 1800s. That's like borderline social ruin. And because Colin interrupts their dance, Lord Debling is able to see the truth, and he can see that Colin and Penelope have feelings for each other, so Lord Debling does not propose. This upsets Penelope and she runs out of the ball, of course closely followed by Colin. Because where else would Colin Bridgerton be if not trailing closely behind Penelope Featherington? We are then graced with the infamous carriage scene. Colin gets in the carriage with Penelope, he professes his love to her, he proposes to her, amongst other things that happen in between those two things. Now, something that I think is really interesting is that in the book, when this carriage scene happens, the carriage scene is probably like the most iconic scene from their book. When the carriage scene happens in the book, it's directly after Colin finds out that Penelope is Lady Whistledown. So Colin is fully aware of her being Whistledown before he proposes to her and before they ever have sex. However, in the show, Colin proposes to Penelope before he finds out that she's Lady Whistledown, and I'd be willing to bet that they probably are going to have sex before he finds out she's Lady Whistledown as well. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see how Colin finding this information out is going to affect their relationship and their engagement. But let's move on to some other characters in the show. Starting out with the Featheringtons, just because I want to get them out of the way. Once again, no surprise to me, the plot of the Featheringtons this season bores the hell out of me. Prudence and Philippa are both married now and are desperately trying to produce an heir so that the Featheringtons do not lose all of their money. Shonda tried to give the Featheringtons a non-financial based plotline challenge. Go. Level impossible. Every season, it's the same thing with these Featheringtons. They're running out of money. They need to find a way to fix their financial situation. That sounded like I was singing Hamilton. I actually cannot wait for Colin and Penelope to get married. So hopefully the Featheringtons never have to talk about financial issues ever again. The only good part about the Featherington plot this season is that it's a little funny when Philippa and Prudence just do not understand how sex and babies work, but that's only a good gag like maybe 2 or 3 times. And now I'm over it. I want to move on. And moving on is exactly what we're going to do. Next, we're going to talk about Canthony. Canthony, as of part 1, is only in 1 episode, and even though their screen time is small, it is still mighty. At the very beginning of episode 1, there's a moment where Kate is the only one to suggest that the person playing the piano downstairs is probably Francesca. And I love this scene for 2 reasons. 1, it shows that Kate is doing a very good job at stepping into her role as Viscountess and as leader of this family, and it shows how well she knows all of the individual Bridgertons, especially Francesca. And 2, it also shows that Kate is the only member of the Bridgerton family with more than 1 brain cell, which I think is very funny. Kate and Violet also share a really nice moment in this episode where Violet mentions that she's sorry it's taking her so long to move out of the house, and Kate tells her that it's fine. She actually really appreciates Violet's presence. Violet helps a lot around the house, and she's really helping Kate manage this whole Viscountess role. Later in the episode, Kate and Anthony decide that they want to go on a second honeymoon, mostly because Anthony cannot keep his hands off of her for more than 5 seconds. They are actually insane. So the lovely couple leaves again for yet another honeymoon, hopefully to return in part 2 of season 3. Fingers crossed. Next Bridgerton that I want to talk about is Eloise. One of the more interesting parts of season 3 is Eloise and her newfound friendship with Cressida Cowper. At first, Cressida still seems to be very set in her ways of bullying Penelope, but it also seems like Eloise might be helping in getting Cressida to leave Penelope alone. Eloise and Cressida are an incredibly unlikely pair. I know that we were all shocked when we saw them together in the trailer, and it seems that the main reason that they're friends now is because Cressida was there for Eloise when Penelope was off hiding in the country during the off-season. There are definitely some interesting developments to the character of Eloise overall. She's wearing a lot more ruffles and more like girly dresses this season. She also states that she's reading Emma, which is a Jane Austen novel, which is very different from the books that we know Eloise to be reading. And the most confusing part of her new personality to her family is obviously her friendship with Cressida. But despite all of this, we still see Eloise struggling to have these meaningless conversations with these debutantes, and she still seems bored out of her mind, so she's still the Eloise that we know and love. There's actually a very interesting dichotomy between Eloise and Penelope being extremely uncomfortable in their newfound environments. Eloise is uncomfortable having to engage in these meaningless and boring conversations with these debutantes, and Penelope is uncomfortable with this newfound attention she's getting from these male suitors because of her new looks. Cressida, still being Cressida, unfortunately steps on the back of Penelope's dress like I mentioned and rips it in front of Lord Debeling. Once this happens though, Eloise is clearly very upset over it. She even apologizes to Penelope before Penelope runs out of the ball. To me, this shows that Eloise isn't friends with Cressida to spite Penelope. It's simply just that Eloise needed a friend when she felt like Penelope wasn't that anymore. In a way, Cressida really only seems to be herself when she's with Eloise. She opens up to her about how she doesn't really have any friends, and she even admits that she's fallen prey herself to the way that society makes women treat each other when it comes to the marriage mart. Like, she's seemingly self-aware of the fact that she's a bully and not necessarily a good person. But it also seems like Cressida is open to trying to change her ways. Later on, at another ball, Eloise spills the tea to Cressida that Colin has been giving Penelope lessons on how to find a husband. And you watch this and you think, oh, Eloise, why would you tell that to Cressida? Of all people. But later, when Cressida is asked if she has any juicy gossip, she actively says no and chooses to keep Eloise's secret, which is development on Cressida's behalf. So then how does everybody find out that Colin has been giving Penelope lessons? Well, it turns out that it was actually Eloise's fault because when she told this to Cressida, she was pretty loud about it and other people overheard and spread the news. Eloise is even quick to blame Cressida for spreading the rumor, but when Eloise finds out that it was her own fault, she actually goes to the Featherington house and tells Penelope that it was her fault and apologizes for it. And this scene between Penelope and Eloise is actually really, really sad to watch because you can tell that they both miss their best friend. And I do think that it's very admirable of Eloise to go and tell Penelope herself when she found out that it was her fault. It definitely shows that Eloise still cares a lot about Penelope. The relationship between Eloise and Cressida provides a really interesting contrast to both of their characters. And I think that's why I find their relationship so interesting. Because of her friendship with Eloise, we also get to see a lot more of Cressida's home life in this season. We get to see how her family treats her. And I think that this really opens her up as a character and explains a lot of why she is the way that she is. Long story short, I'm team Eloisida, or Creloise. I wouldn't be shocked, honestly, if they went the route of Cressida finding out that she has feelings for Eloise, or even Cressida finding out that she has feelings for Penelope and that's why she's been a bully to her this whole time. I wouldn't be shocked, and I fully support Cressida finding, having her own little self journey. Next, I want to talk about Francesca. In this season, Francesca Bridgerton is played by a new actress named Hannah Dodd. And I just want to say, I feel like Hannah is such a breath of fresh air in this show. I'd say Francesca is probably my number one standout character of season 3 so far. Francesca is clearly very different from all the other debutantes. She doesn't necessarily respond well to the male attention that she attracts. She's someone who likes quiet and peacefulness, which isn't something you find a lot of in the Bridgerton house. She has a very lovely moment with Penelope where Penelope basically tells her that once you get on the wall, it's very difficult to get off of it. Because, the whole theme this season is about wallflowers. At one ball, the queen finds Francesca playing piano in a different room, thanks to the meddling of Lady Danbury, of course. And the queen takes a very quick interest in Francesca. She admires the fact that Francesca wasn't performing for the queen, but she was simply just performing for herself. And so the queen sort of takes Francesca under her wing, kind of making her the diamond of the season, even though it's never really explicitly stated. And the queen and Lady Danbury try to find Francesca a suitor, because of course that's what they do every season for the diamond. However, this is when Francesca meets one John Sterling, who we know from Francesca's book. They literally have the 1800s equivalent of a meet cute, where they meet each other outside of this ball because they both are literally just looking for silence. And John's like, maybe we can enjoy the quiet together. And Francesca's like, okay. John Sterling calls on Francesca the next day, which kind of confuses Violet because Violet was expecting Lord Samidali to show up, which is, of course, the queen's choice for Francesca. But Fran is super interested in John. They go and sit on a couch and they literally just sit in silence because they are so awkward, and I'm obsessed with them. Later, Francesca sees John on the streets and they have another very awkward encounter, which John kind of runs away from, and that kind of off-puts Francesca at first, but later, she finds out that the reason he ran off is because he was going to go and get the music that they were hearing on the streets rearranged in the key that Francesca said it would sound much better in, which is actually maybe the most romantic thing anybody could ever do for Francesca. That speaks perfectly to her love language, which is piano. and it's just about the cutest thing. I am obsessed with them, and I love them. And you can tell Violet is like a little confused by Francesca's interest in John, but she can tell that Francesca is happy with him, so she accepts it. And speaking of Violet, she's not left out this season. As it turns out, Penelope is not the only one that gets to experience the best friend's brother trope, because Violet meets a new character named Lord Anderson, who happens to be Lady Danbury's brother. Now, Lady Danbury absolutely hates her brother for a reason that we do not know, but I'm sure we'll find out about it in part 2. But Lord Anderson definitely has an interest in Violet. And honestly, I say go for it, Violet. Because if Lady Danbury gets to fuck your dad, like we learned in Queen Charlotte, you get a freebie. You can get with her brother all you want. And as for the last, and apparently the least important Bridgerton, if you ask Shonda and Netflix, we're going to talk about Benedict's non-existent plotline in this season. For starters, Benedict talks a lot about how he feels like he has no purpose. He says that he liked when Anthony was on his honeymoon because he got to take over some of Anthony's responsibilities, and it sort of gave him a temporary purpose. However, Benedict would clearly rather be purposeless than engage in the marriage mart at all this season. It's honestly kind of crazy to me that the second born Bridgerton is reduced to like the same amount of screen time as Hyacinth and Gregory, which, side note, the actors who play Hyacinth and Gregory are a little bit older this season, so they're a little more involved, which makes me very happy because they are such fun characters to have in a scene, and they definitely provide a lot of comedic relief, so I'm very happy to see them being more and more involved each season. Eventually, at a ball, Benedict very reluctantly dances with a random debutante. He then goes and talks to Will Mondrich and gives him this whole speech about how once you're married, you are free from the rules of society, and Benedict hates the rules of society. So it's almost like Benedict just needs to, I don't know, get married. It's almost like it's time for him to have his season next. In episode 3, Benedict meets Tilly Arnold, a widowed lady who is very strongly opinionated, bold, and apparently into engineering. Obviously, Benedict is intrigued by Tilly, and he finds her later at a ball where they have a very interesting conversation. Tilly basically says to his face that she is not looking to make Benedict her husband. And to Benedict, that is like music to his ears. The next day, Benedict goes to call on Tilly. He brings her flowers. How very sweet of him. And Tilly literally goes, "I don't wish to be called on." After that, of course, they go upstairs to engage in meaningful conversations, and that's about it for Benedict in part 1. I do think that there are a lot of signs that point to Benedict being the lead of season 4, but I feel like that's a topic for a different video. So if you guys want me to make a video with all the evidence that I think leads to Benedict being the lead of season 4, let me know. I would love to make that video. There are a few other side plots going on in the season that I want to talk about very quickly. One of those being Will Mondrich and his family. They find themselves inheriting money and an estate and a title, and that puts them into high society. However, now that they're in high society, Will has to decide if he wants to sell his club or not, which is a very hard decision for him because his club is something that he really loves and he's worked his whole life for. So I do feel very bad for him having to decide if he wants to sell his club or not. Also, I love that they're allowing more moments to happen between Brimsley and the Queen now, especially now that we know them as characters because of Queen Charlotte. It's really fun to see them interacting more. So my final thoughts for Bridgerton Season 3 Part 1. I think this season has some very interesting potential. It's hard to fully make an opinion though when the season is split into 2 parts and you only have Part 1. One thing that I do think is super interesting that I've talked about already in this video is the fact that they're letting Colin and Penelope get engaged before Colin knows that she is Lady Whistledown. I would think that when he finds out, the shock is going to hurt him so much more because they'll be engaged and probably because they'll already have had sex at that point. And so I wonder how they're going to fix such a big relationship issue in such a short amount of time. I'm intrigued by that, and I'm maybe a little worried by that. I'm sure they only did that for the drama because, you know, Shonda Rhimes loves her drama. I'm literally in the middle of a Grey's Anatomy rewatch. I know how much Shonda loves her drama. But that makes me wonder if Shonda is really the best choice to run a show based on romance books, because you don't want your drama to outweigh the romance of your story. I think that's something that she struggles to balance well. I think that part 2 of season 3 has the potential to be better than part 1 for sure. I think every Bridgerton season takes a couple of episodes to really get going, to get the ball rolling, to really get into the meat of the season. And I hate that this season was split in half, because it feels like episode 3, episode 4, we finally started to get into the meat of the show just for our legs to be cut out from underneath us and for them to be like, just kidding, you have to wait a whole month to see what else happens. It kind of feels like a momentum killer in a way, but whatever, what are you going to do about it? The standouts for me this season are Francesca, both as a character and also her very interesting relationship with John. And also Eloise and her relationship with Cressida is very fascinating to me. Not just because I like seeing how Cressida affects Eloise, but I'm really enjoying seeing the effect that Eloise has on Cressida as a character. This season has really opened me up to Cressida in a way that I didn't expect to happen. So I'm very curious to see where they take her character in part 2 of this show, especially considering how Cressida is in Pauline's book. It's all very interesting to me, and I'm curious to see where they go with it. So long story short, season 3 so far is good, but I need part 2 to decide if it's great. But that does it for this video. Comment down below and let me know what you think of Bridgerton season 3 part 1 so far. I'm very curious to see if you guys are enjoying it in the way that I am. Make sure you follow me on all my other social medias so you don't miss out on when I post anything over there. Make sure you check out my podcast that I have with my boyfriend. And also, like I've mentioned in this video, make sure you check out my Patreon, where I post reaction videos and commentary tracks every Monday and Friday. As of right now, you can go and watch my full reactions to Bridgerton season 3 part 1, along with my commentary tracks for Bridgerton season 1 and season 2. I have my first commentary tracks for every show free to everybody, so if you want to see what it's like, you can go and watch my season 1, episode 1 Bridgerton commentary track for free, and then you can decide if you want to join my Patreon. But that does it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye. I can't believe I've been in this chair for like 2 hours repeating the same video twice because my audio didn't record the first time. I'm so exhausted and my throat hurts.